I've played a lot of games of Dead by Daylight, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot. And one thing I've been noticing recently is that there's at least one survivor every single game making one of these 5 mistakes, if not more. So I wanted to make this video to show you these mistakes and how you can avoid them. Not only to make your survivor experience better, but also your teammates. So let's get into it. Mistake number 1 that I see a lot of survivors make would be unhooking in front of the killer. This is a surefire way to get the person you just unhooked tunneled and put your team in an incredibly bad spot. Now, there are some circumstances where unhooking in front of the killer makes sense, like if the killer is camping from a distance, or if it's the end of the game and you haven't taken a hook yet, so you're buying your team more time. But if it's still at 4 or 5 gens, like super early in the game, there's no real reason for you to go for a trade. What ends up happening if you go for a trade too early in the game, the killer is looking to snowball pressure, so if the killer is still right next to the hook when you go for the save, they're either going to leave you slugged on the ground while going for the person you just unhooked, or waiting the borrowed time on the person you just unhooked, leaving them slugged and going for somebody else, or instantly picking them up again. None of these options are positive for your team. This takes 2 survivors out of 4 out of the game completely, because you are out of the ground and you can't do anything productive, and the other survivor is being chased trying to get distance because borrowed time already ran out. The best thing to do is hover in the area and make sure the killer is left, give it a few seconds, and then take them off the hook. This ensures that even if the killer does come back to hook, you have time to make distance and get somewhere safe before the killer is able to find you. This leads me to mistake number 2. Don't loop the killer right next to the hook. This is really difficult because there may not be a lot of areas to loop, and maybe the killer was proxying so you got caught on your way to get the hook. If you're full health, one of the best things to do is to take a hit, because you do get a speed boost when you take a hit from the killer, and then try and make distance to a pallet somewhere else. The reason you don't want to loop around the hook is because it makes it almost impossible for someone to run past the killer and grab the save. And it's not really the killer's job to leave you alone to allow you to get the hook. So what ends up happening is the person on the hook ends up second staging or even dying just so you could potentially not lose 1 health state. This again takes 2 survivors out of the game, maybe even more if more try to come and save and they don't know what's happening. It stalls the game more than any slowdown perks do. Mistake number 3 would be careful when you're taking a borrowed time hit. Now, I know if you're in a Swift, sometimes it feels really nice when your friend gets you off the hook to take a hit for them so they can get distance. And you do get a mini speed boost so you can get a little bit of distance too. But you want to be careful when taking a borrowed time hit, because if you don't know your surroundings and you don't know where the next pallet or safe area is, you're going to end up just going down again. The killer has no obligation to go after the person who unhooked you, and if you're making it really difficult for them to do so, they're just going to tunnel you out. So you have to be either a really confident looper or have a good understanding of the map for you to take a borrowed time hit right when you get taken off the hook. There are some situations where it makes sense, but in solo queue especially, there's not very many. When a person goes for the unhook, it's kind of on them to be prepared for the killer to chase them afterwards. Mistake number 4 would be don't camp pallets when you already have distance. This is something I see survivors do very often when I'm playing killer. One thing to keep in mind is pallets are for getting distance. So if you've already gotten enough distance, you could just hold W to try and get as much distance as possible and hope the killer gets off of you to go out and do something more important like kicking gens. Or maybe hop on a generator and see if the killer is even still chasing you because you got so much distance. If you do manage to make enough distance, the killer will most likely drop chase. So what ends up happening if you're camping a pallet while waiting for the killer to continue chasing you is you're just wasting time. Now obviously a couple seconds isn't going to be game ruining, but if you do this every single time you get chased, it adds up. Now, camping / pre-dropping pallets can be good, but for that to work well, you have to play around the loop until the killer breaks the pallet. If you're just going to drop the pallet, run to the next pallet, drop the pallet, run to the next pallet without actually trying to use the loop effectively, you're using pallets that don't need to be used, and towards the end of the game, it's going to become really difficult for you to play around the map. And last but not least, mistake number 5. Make sure you have a healthy balance of looking behind you and looking in front of you. I'm sure if you have a friend who plays this game a lot, or even watch content creators, they all tell you to make sure you look behind you. But a lot of times on killer, I see a lot of people looking behind them and they end up not looking in front of them. So I'm here to tell you, make sure you're not looking behind you too much. Looking behind you is very important for spacing. Understanding the space you have between you and the killer, so you know whether or not you need to use a pallet, whether you'll make a vault, or so on. So it is something that's incredibly important to do, but having a healthy balance where you could look behind you for a little bit, know where the killer is at, understand your spacing, and then kind of run the loop the way it should be ran is the most effective way to play Survivor when looping. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say thank you for watching the video. If you made it this far, make sure to like and subscribe because I do plan on making more educational content in the future for both killer and survivor as I do play both sides. And leave a comment for what's the most annoying part about playing